Hello, and thank you for joining us for the Black Hills IP webinar, How Automation and AI are Changing Professional Opportunities in the IP Profession. A recording of the webinar and the slides will be made available to all registrants. Feel free to enter any questions using the Q&A feature in the Zoom menu. We invite you to follow us on LinkedIn to see news about other upcoming webinars. And with that, I'll turn things over to our moderator.
Thank you, and thank everybody for joining us today. We've got a great panel of speakers going through their perspectives on how AI is impacting the legal profession and careers within it. Our speakers, I'll start from the screen, starting on the left side. Sokolowski Karian, who we know as Z, is a docketing manager at the law firm of Schwegman, Lundberg, and Worcester. Ellen Franco is the docketing team manager at Black Hills IP. Leonie Mann, who I think personally is an excellent example of the careers that are becoming available as a result of AI, is the automation specialist at the law firm Schwegman, Lundberg, and Worcester. Adam Rees is our IP automation specialist lead at Black Hills IP. Manjeet Rege is joining us. He's a professor at the University of St. Thomas and is the director of the Center of Applied Artificial Intelligence. I'm Russ Slifer. I'm the CEO of Black Hills IP. I'll also be sharing some of my perspective today on how AI is affecting the legal profession, as I'm also a patent attorney. So our next slide, I'll just introduce what we're going to be talking about today. So Manjeet is going to start off and give us a big picture of the digital transformation and automation across industries in general, and what trends he's seeing and what we should be expecting to see in the future. I'll talk about some automation tools that are affecting attorneys and kind of where that may be leading us. Ellen, Leonie, and Adam are going to talk about different career paths, focusing primarily on docketing and automation that we do at Black Hills IP. And then Z is going to talk about how the docketing department has changed within a law firm as she manages it. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Manjeet to give us the big picture on AI. Manjeet?
Yes, thank you, Russ, and hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us. So I'll start off with talking a little bit about AI and the capabilities of AI, where we are seeing primarily automation coming into play. So I want to emphasize that AI is primarily augmenting our work. So let me show you an interesting story that appeared locally here in Minnesota. The hospitality and leisure industry has been hiring, but remains down 40,000 workers, which is 14% down from the pre-pandemic time. So it's what you see on the right, where you see a robot bringing out food from the kitchen out to the table. So this is the latest wave of automation for the restaurant business, coming after ordering on iPads and viewing menus on cell phones. But now, with more difficulties hiring staff, restaurants nationwide are turning to robotic food runners. So this particular robot called Didi is the first known robotic food runner and busser operating in a Minnesota restaurant, and is designed for repetitive runs to and fro from the kitchen. So that allows the restaurant staff to focus more on customers. Restaurant staff say that the robot provides extra help when they really need it. Servers benefit by robots doing their kitchen runs by ultimately getting more tables, more time with their customers, Also, it is not eliminating people because they cannot find people in the first place. So this robot is manufactured by a company in California, and each robot is kind of pre-programmed with the map of the restaurant layout. A kitchen staffer can hit a table number, press go, or the robot will then take off from the kitchen, make multiple stops, and deliver food along the way. Two Minnesota senior living centers, dining rooms, are about to get their first robots as well. So we expect robots serving food and drinks to become a commonplace, not only in restaurants, but also at casinos, hotels, event receptions, where they'll be stopping for like 30 seconds at a time at a pre-mapped station so attendees can pick up food. So that is in the restaurant business. Moving on to other domains, like warehouses, for example. Over the last decade, online retailing and shipping industries have steadily automated more and more of their warehouses. So for now, I think somewhere around 2,000 AI-powered robots have been deployed in many warehouses across US, with a typical large warehouse having one or two robots in them. But the industry has reached a new inflection point. Each warehouse will soon house upwards of 10 robots, growing the total to tens of thousands within the next few years. So what we expect then is we'll be having more or different kinds of jobs getting created over the next few years. So in recent times, a lot more people have been shopping online because of the pandemic. So as e-commerce demand skyrocketed and labor shortages intensified, last year during the holiday season, millions of packages were delayed. And this year it could be even worse. So there have been studies, one such estimate from Deloitte that says that the online sales will jump 11 to 15% this season. So a lot of the lower level work, such as sorting of items, packing of items, can be given to a robot to do. So that speeds up your overall process of completing that order. And there have been studies from Wharton School of Business as well as from New York University that has shown that companies that embrace AI are able to flourish a lot more. And because they succeed, they end up hiring more people. At the same time, any job loss comes from companies who do not embrace AI or do not adopt robots. So that causes them to lose their competitive advantage, and then they end up laying off workers. So the new kind of jobs are going to be things that perhaps AI cannot do. And I'll shortly talk about the limitations of AI, but just a quick point here. For objects that stump robots, like let's say it's a delicate pottery that you do not want AI to be handling that. So a central routing algorithm can send all of those to a station with human packers. More common items like household goods and school supplies would go to a station with robots, for example. So roles like packing boxes and bags will be displaced while new ones will appear. So some directly related to maintaining and supervising robots. And there will be newer jobs because you're completing your orders and delivering them on time, you need more people helping out. So that will lead to more people getting hired in logistics and delivery, operations. So rather than attempt to stop the trend of automation, it's better to focus on easing the transition by helping workers reskill and creating new opportunities for career growth. Let me now talk about what AI can or cannot do. We all hear in the media about AI taking over our jobs, but honestly, there is a big shortage of AI skill set. Jobs requesting AI or machine learning skills are expected to increase by 71% in the next 5 years. Misconceptions of AI, through sci-fi movies are plenty. While AI has made a lot of strides towards replicating human intelligence, it is primarily on certain specialized tasks. So what we call AI today being so powerful, a human is a lot more powerful than an AI. A human has generalized intelligence. AI has specialized intelligence that can primarily solve one problem and execute only one task at a time. Often, AI can be rigid, unable to respond to any changes in the input, or it cannot perform a typical thinking that a human would when posed an unexpected challenge. So what I'm saying here, automating a simple concept, AI can automate a simple concept. Now, simple is a relative term, and I'll give you more examples about what I mean by simple soon. But if there is something that is perhaps repeatable and it is one particular task only that does not have a lot of unexpected behavior, AI perhaps can do that for you, as long as you have plenty of data to go along with it. So as long as you have a lot of data to give AI to learn from, you can perhaps have AI do it. So let me show you a few examples now about what AI is perhaps good at and what AI is perhaps not so good at. We all receive spam emails, right? As a human, you never sit through and read through those detailed emails where somebody wishes to donate millions of dollars to you and they ask you for your bank account. You quickly know that this is a spam, right? So you're not giving a lot of deep thought to it. So anything that you can do with a second of thought, you can probably automate it. Audio transcription, once again, the same thing. You have plenty of data that you can give AI to learn from. Online advertising. So will somebody click on an ad or not? I have a lot of data to support that. Self-driving car, right? So again, when you think about driving a car, you are looking at objects in front of you. You're probably listening to music or talking to the passenger next to you. So you're not involved in the deep thought about driving. So again, if I have a lot of data footage, video footage coming in about how does one navigate through the obstacles in the road, AI can do that. And we have already seen technology. Fault detection. As a human, I can quickly detect that this particular item that has been manufactured has a scratch on it. It is defective, not a deeper thought. I can take examples of that and give AI, and AI can learn from that. But what AI cannot do is, if you want to have a 20-page market research study report and produce a 20-page report, that involves a lot of deeper thought, a lot of research. AI today has not reached that stage where it is capable of producing an outcome like that. Let me show you a few more examples about capabilities. Let's say you want to automate the processing of emails or the categorization of responses coming through your customers sending messages to you. So it could be the messages that they send through email or through a chatbot. So let's say you receive a message like this: the item I bought arrived late. It was for a retirement gift for a colleague. The item arrived after the retirement party. I would like to return it. Now, what AI can do is look at the content and then quickly categorize that as perhaps a return or an exchange or some other category. So you have existing, let's say, bins or baskets where that message could quickly be categorized. So if it is a return and it is time sensitive, people, humans could be processing that return basket of messages. It can do that. AI can do that. What AI cannot do is produce a paragraph of text like this as a response that only a human today can do. Let me show you another example. In a self-driving car, what you have is you have video feed coming in, and it is very important for AI to detect, are these images real objects? Are those uh, images of objects maybe on the billboard? And then you have to, AI quickly also has to figure out a bounding box around those objects. So where exactly are these objects appearing in this live feed? But what AI cannot do is it cannot distinguish between different human gestures. So if you have somebody, let's say, waving their hand, and if you could go on to next, Michelle. So a gesture like stop, a gesture like hitchhiking, a gesture like waving, we know that the intent in these three gestures are different, but for an AI, all these three appear the same. So it cannot distinguish between the three. You go on to the next slide. Once again, if you have plenty of medical image data with labels that this particular image has a particular kind of a medical condition, testing positive or testing negative. Again, AI can learn from this pre-labeled data because you have plenty of data. But what AI cannot do is produce paragraphs of text explaining your diagnosis or your prognosis to you, a customized explanation, perhaps that a human can do. And so there are limitations of AI. Next slide, please. So hopefully, that gives you some perspective about limitations of AI. And I wanted to talk about that before we look at these numbers, because when you look at these numbers in isolation, it could be a little bit scary that all of these, remember, are estimates for the next decade or so about the number of jobs that might be displaced in US and worldwide. So I want to make a distinction between jobs, those will be displaced by AI, and jobs that will be exposed to AI. So reskilling, of course, is an important aspect. And as long as you're able to reskill yourself, you're able to adapt to that change. Next slide. So few jobs that are, let's say, are at minimum risk. I spoke about the limitations of AI. First is creative jobs. AI typically needs a goal to optimize. It cannot invent like scientists or novelists, like artists. Second is the complex strategic jobs, executives, diplomats, economists, lawyers, Third is jobs that need empathy, such as teachers, nannies, doctors. So these jobs require a compassion, a trust, so which AI does not have. And even if AI tried to fake it, nobody would want a chatbot telling them that they have cancer, or a robot to sit and babysit their children, for example. So there are certain jobs that will be exposed to AI. There are certain jobs that have the probability of getting displaced by AI. Next slide, please. So what you see here is the probability of different kind of jobs getting displaced by AI. So higher you are in this particular chart, the probability of getting displaced by AI is much higher. So if you look higher up in this chart, most of the jobs are blue collar jobs that may get affected in manufacturing, construction, and so on and so forth. Anything that involves a human element happens to be much lower on this particular chart. So, for example, this red box over here is showing us that not that legal profession is completely safe, but it is much lower in terms of the probability of getting displaced. The role, the function of a lawyer would always be there. That is not something that an AI can completely do. But the task that perhaps a lawyer does could be done. So, in AI can help out a lawyer going through doing a much better search, for example, go through the court proceedings using natural language processing. So with that, let me hand it back over to Russ.
Thank you, Manjeet. I think that's a great introduction to how AI and tools are being developed that are going to cut across all industries and all sectors of employment. And today we were going to kind of focus a bit on the legal side. And, you know, it's heartening to see that at the moment it's down at the bottom of that affected. But I think when we drill in a little bit, especially into the practice of IP attorneys and organizations, we're going to see that it's actually affecting more of the operations than necessarily would be reflected in that slide, in my opinion. Now, I'm dating myself a little bit when I say that as a patent attorney for the last 25 years, when I first got out of law school, the tools that were available to draft patent applications basically consisted of the suite of Word and Excel and you know, those office products. And I was used to typing things. I got to the law firm and they wanted me to, you know, if I wanted a draft, I'd use a dictaphone and wait a day or two to get a draft back. And that never made any sense to me. So of course I started using Dragon software to try and dictate my own. So I don't know what the future is. And on the next slide, what I do know is that the future is going to be changing inevitably from what we, not only what we see today, but we probably don't even have a clue of what it's going to be tomorrow. I'm still waiting for that flying car that we were promised, but it doesn't look like it's going to be too far away. So I don't know where in the IP legal space we're going to go for sure, but I do know that, as Manjeet said, the focus is going to be on the legal and technical skills of the employees. AI is not going to be able to draft that application for a new invention and capture it and describe it in the way that a human can. It's not going to have the technical skills to understand the inventions and talk to the inventors and see how that invention might apply to different technology areas. But what I do know is that automation is good at dealing with repetitive tasks that increase the overhead, human tasks that create errors. It's good at spotting where anomalies occur in processing faster. So look for automation in the legal profession to be focused on how do you reduce overhead? How do you reduce errors, improve the turnaround time? And finally, one reason why we're where we are in history with AI is that we've got a unique confluence of data storage capacity, processing power, and a large amount of data. When you bring all those together, it opens up opportunities that for using artificial intelligence that weren't available before. So let me take a couple minutes and just look at a few examples of where we are today in the IP space. So if I start from the beginning of prosecution, there's an invention disclosure of some sort that comes into a law firm, whether that's a PDF, some kind of form, electronic transmission from a client, of course, the sitting down with an inventor. But if you've got a large client that has a lot of disclosures, converting that information into something useful for the firm and into a docketing system is an error-prone process. So how can you automate this to be custom for each customer or each client, and yet eliminate the redundancy, the problem with human typing? So on the next slide, the Schwegman law firm looked at this and realized that technology could be extremely helpful in looking at those disclosures, converting it, for example, to a different structured file format like XML, and then parsing that into different fields that could be imported through an API into a system like Foundation IP. That way, you don't have a human keying in inventor names and other data that's contained in those disclosure forms, perhaps making typos. But at the same time, when you put that into a system, you can generate milestones that match those particular customers' needs. And then you can also automate some analytics to monitor those. So while there may not be a commercial product available for this is one example where a law firm realized that, creating these tools would benefit both the law firm, and it changes some of the employment opportunities within the firm. So switching from getting the information into the firm to actually generating work product and creating a patent application. Next slide, please. There's been a lot of effort in this particular area, and I credit that mainly to creative patent attorneys that have said, how are we going to create tools to help us in the primary area where they're spending most of their time, and that is drafting patent applications. So there's a lot of commercially available products out there. I'm not necessarily endorsing any of them, and some of them I haven't even used, but I know that the Schwegman firm uses Turbo Patent and use the Herity product and Patentbots and Claim Master. So there's a lot of different tools out here to make the process much more efficient. So turning to Turbo Patent on the next slide, this particular tool really is an interactive tool with the patent draftsperson, writing the claims, able to convert one set of claims into parallel claims, keeping track of reference numbers, helping drawing, automating the process of drafting. So it's I know this tool has had substantial impact in reducing the amount of time that a patent attorney is spending doing what I used to call cut and paste and reviewing and focusing actually on the quality of the description. Next slide, please. Herity has a similar product, again, created by a patent law firm, focusing on how they can, for every minute that you can automate a task that was done manually by the attorney is both reducing the overhead, but focusing on that part of the creation process that can't be replicated in technology. Another product, for example, that's out there is, in the next slide, is Patentbots, which really is focusing on when that work product is done, putting some automated proofreading into it. They also offer art unit prediction from the USPTO, examiner statistics, prosecution statistics, which is kind of a segue into the next topic I wanted to touch on. And that is, aside from tools to help with the work product that I've been talking about so far, what kind of tools are available? How can we leverage this data into actual production management tools for a law firm? Looking at things like the load and the capacity of the patent attorneys and agents, focusing on-time delivery to keep your clients happy, providing dashboards with views of that. So I've added a few slides in here. I won't get into great detail in each one, but just to kind of show the audience what is available. So if you've got a large firm, I guess it doesn't matter if it's large or small, but you can have a dashboard and take a look at the turnaround time of every employee that's producing. So are they past due? What have they got for the next 30 or 60 or even 90 days? It gives you a view into the future. It also helps you identify any areas that seem to be bottlenecks and might create problems with turnaround for particular clients. Likewise, on the next slide, you can look at it slightly different in more of a heat map side and forecast which attorneys might be low on work in the future and focus on shifting some of the workload of the firm to them, where some others may have overextended themselves in the future, and that might be an area that's going to create some problems if you don't pay attention to it now. Another opportunity, looking at the data, next slide, would be just looking firm-wide. What is the load of the firm? How much is on time? What is the overall loading of the firm? So from a management perspective, it's another tool to help see whether you've got an increase coming in the future, or if you're, for some reason, you've been dropping off on the work product. Next slide. Slightly different, looking at the mix of what prosecution is on the workload of particular attorneys and which ones have got a heavy load or a good balance of prep with that prosecution. So again, just another visual, all of this being processed in the background with a large amount of data. Next. Percent on time, just simply taking a look at your team. If you're managing a team of attorneys that are working for a particular client, taking a look and seeing who's efficient, who's not efficient, and allowing you to focus your energies on managing there. Next slide. So where is it going? I wish I could tell you exactly where it's going. It would help in business myself, but I know the answers are just around the corner. We've got more advancements in analytics tools that are being developed, and that's looking at more data from the USPTO and examiners and workload. For example, using AI to predict what the workload is going to look like. For example, if you analyze a portfolio, where is it filed, or where is it filed, where is it the examiner in the USPTO, you can predict when an office action might come. How many office actions in that case will it take to get an allowance? What is the chance of continued prosecution in them? And then you can forecast for your firm or your clients how much that workload is going to, how much workload is going to be generated. You can also look at costing from that. USPTO tools. USPTO, like any other organization, is leveraging AI and will continue to do so. So I would anticipate to see some automated searches coming from the USPTO. I'd expect to see more tools on examination, perhaps even automated examination of some sort down the road. So how is that going to affect patent practitioners? I touched on workload prediction, but again, we had the data I was just showing you on workload, but that's based on data that's currently available. I'm thinking more of predicting what impact cases transferred into the firm will have, how many actions they'll have, so on. Intelligent shell documents. We have got, everybody uses shell documents, but not necessarily interactive for prosecution. I think we'll see advancements there. And that gives a good segue into our next group. Black Hills IP is already pioneering and leading the way in automated docketing. That's going to continue advancements. There's some great tools and coming in the future, but we're already way ahead of the curve. And renewals, there's a lot of innovating that can be done around renewals and deciding when to pay renewals and looking at the value of patents. So I saw one question that came in. I'll quickly hop in on that, asking about AI in looking for design patent infringement. We may not be there yet with AI, but I will say that's the kind of task that Manjeet pointed out, where AI can take the drawings from a design patent and look at potential infringers quickly, and if not give an exact example of where infringement, at least bucketize it and focus the attorney into a more productive review. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ellen, Leone, and Adam to talk about career paths in docketing automation. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ellen Franco. Michelle, can you switch to the next slide, please? Thank you. I'm the docketing manager here at Black Hills IP. I started at Black Hills IP in 2015, where I learned manual docketing country by country due to a large backlog, along with a few other coworkers, one of which is Leone Mann, who's on this program as well. Since a group of us were training, we actually had to create a standard of docketing for each communication, regardless of paralegal or attorney preferences. This led us to keep large binders of notes on how to process each item. And soon these binders were translated into checklists. As BHIP's workload grew, so did our docketing team. Soon I became the docketing trainer, training our team on the standard docketing practices that we created, and then moved into the manager role, managing the docketing department. My role as a manager has changed as our automations has changed. The role of a typical 2015 docketer is no longer needed, and now I manage a team of docketers that continue to process items while continuing to work with our automation and development teams to ensure that the automation that has been set up in place is working as expected, which is efficient and highly accurate docketing, as well as the docketers now work with automation and development in identifying other opportunities to leverage automation and technology tools. Now I'm going to hand it over to Leone so she can explain her journey into automation specialists.
Thank you, Ellen. As Ellen mentioned, I began as an entry-level docketer for SLW in 2015 as well. I knew nothing about docketing, so the training was memorable. For me, looking back on it now, the training was unique because the backlog forced us to do the same actions repeatedly. Though we were doing data entry, there was still pressure to get the backlog completed as quickly as we could and without making any errors. Our binders of notes grew, of course, because we wanted to be accurate and not make silly mistakes that could potentially turn into a fatal error. I wanted to do my job as best as I could, but sometimes it's easy to become complacent when you do the same thing repeatedly for 8 hours every day. We received feedback from our verification reviews as well as from paralegals, and this too was helpful and lent a hand to building the checklist we still use today. It was intimidating for sure to be surrounded by experienced doctors who knew so much already and kept everything they knew in their heads, while I had to continuously refer to my binders. But let me tell you, 6 years later, those binders Ellen and I put together helped create the nomenclature of our docketing, especially foreign docketing. As our checklist started to become more logical and easier to follow, we began to see our standard for docketing, as Ellen mentioned. 3 months into my training, I was presented with an opportunity to learn a database tool that would help organize our docketing. I transferred everything from our binders into that database. Mind you, I didn't go to school for programming, but I took a chance to learn something new. I asked a lot of questions about how the database worked and what it could do. I asked a lot of people from different departments why we did the things the way we did. During that time, the answer was almost always, well, because we've always done it this way. With help and cooperation from other doctors, management, paralegals, and attorneys, we began to step away from that way of thinking. Instead, we implemented small changes to our processes and started to do things differently. It took some time to organize all of the different procedures and checklists, but eventually we began to auto docket documents like filing receipts and original letters patents. Though this scared my coworkers at first, I started showing and demonstrating to them why we should automate. They started to see that auto-docketed documents weren't making errors, and I assured them that that was because it did what we wanted to do. We told it what to do. They soon realized they had more time to focus on better documentation for their docketing. And gradually they started to ask if we could automate this or automate that. So we wanted to see what else we could automate. And we saw absolutely no boundaries with our capabilities. The demand for automating documents was becoming higher. So we actually created an automation team that I managed. And we were constantly looking for ways to be smart with our docketing. Our automated docketing has standard procedures that allows any docketer to work with any docketing system. We have customized and procedures and checklists for clients who have specific preferences. And this is just to name a few of our capabilities. And just recently, we deployed an automated report out to our clients that contain PDF attachments that aren't just randomly grouped together. Instead, our automation continues to progress and we give our clients the documents in a sequential order that is appealing and actually helpful to them. Our team has since grown and so has our database. And has become more complex. It works with other mechanisms now, which Adam has contributed tremendous work to, and he continues to enhance our automation capabilities. Again, I was just an entry-level docketer. I would highly recommend learning something new if or when your job offers it, like in my case. I also think that I wouldn't be in my position today if I didn't take the time and effort to collaborate with my coworkers. Because we trusted a new way of thinking and doing, I truly believe we have an advantage. And before I turn it to Adam, I would just like to say, be willing to get uncomfortable and see where it leads you. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my experience with automation. And now I'll turn it to Adam.
Thanks, Leonie. So I started at Black Hills in 2017 after Ellen and Leonie had laid down the groundwork for consistent docketing practices and automation. Like them, I knew next to nothing about docketing in the beginning, but unlike them, I had a large systematic library of knowledge available to me for learning how to classify and process various documents. And that's due to a lot of their efforts. I trained under Ellen, and within 3 months was able to docket for a large number of countries and systems. And if I saw anything new, I had a database of knowledge to find the answer in. All I needed was to be able to identify the document based on the document itself or the agent communication, and Black Hills systems could lead me to the correct method of processing. This set me up with a holistic docketing knowledge and a mindset for processes and best practices that I would carry over to my automation work. After docketing for a while in various systems, Leonie offered me a position in our growing automation department, and from her I learned how our systems worked behind the scenes. With that knowledge, I could take familiar docketing practices from a manual perspective and move them toward semi or full automation. The inherent problems of docketing and docketing automation are the same. How can we classify documents we receive? How can we extract key data points based on that classification? And how can we enter that data into the target docketing system? Of course, manual processes are designed around manual users. The first step of automation may be to recreate those processes in an automated fashion, but it's often worth thinking about what the given input and desired output are, and whether there's a better way to achieve that with automation rather than simply rehashing the old way of doing things. That ability to consider new ways of processing items has led to my success in this role. And anyone looking to transition to an automation-oriented role will find more success if they're flexible in their thinking, willing to ask questions about why things are done the way they are. Humans and computers excel in different areas. Take advantage of both and you'll go far. The fact of the matter is docketing jobs are changing. Computers can take on the rote tasks and perform them far more consistently and quickly than even the best docketers. Pivoting from a docketing role to a docketing automation specialist role allows you to use your docketing knowledge in creative problem-solving endeavors rather than the strict repetitive tasks of docketing. All of you docketers out there are really automation specialists in the making. You just need the tools to start down that automation path. Our industry is shifting, and embracing that change will open up new and exciting career opportunities if you will let it. And next up, we have Z to talk about how automation has positively changed her work and department.
Thank you, Adam. So let's go to the next slide. I've been at SLW for almost 17 years, and of which 8 of these I've been managing the docketing department. And I've seen how AI has helped my department and other departments at SLW. I saw this being a dream, talked about what was going to happen in the future, and nowadays that dream is a reality. And just focusing in my department, throughout the years, we have seen so many benefits in implementing AI in our jobs and daily routines. And in this slide, we see 2 docketers. One of them is managing the PTO documents that have been received. If you remember, before we used to download these documents from PAIR, and now we have a system that scrapes these documents, our customer numbers from PAIR, and uploads them into our system immediately. Well, before it was one person doing all of this task, had to do an analysis to see where these documents that were received, where they were going to be put in their system, and what dates needed to be docketed. Well, then we would have a second docketer that that would look into these documents received that got docketed into the system and make sure that the information received is entered into our system correctly. A quality check, a second person doing a quality check. Who remembers those old days that you used to have an office full of files and you had to do the download of those documents? Well, I remember, and it was a hassle and it really sucked. But nowadays we don't need these two docketers. We don't need the docketers to work on these tasks because AI is handling those repetitive tasks that they could be done within minutes or depending on the volume of the documents. And those two docketers, they didn't stay without a job. Now what happens to them is that these docketers the responsibilities have shifted. It's not that they stayed without a job, they're just doing something else, doing something where their critical thinking is needed. So in my case, because we don't do our docketing and we are able to focus on thousands of transferred in matters that come in every year and have other docketing tasks that we do as well. But I can tell you that I have 8 ladies in my department, and all year round, we are very busy. And you're going to be like, so, some of them I know that are afraid every time they see one of these webinars are like, am I still going to have a job? And I'm like, oh, honey, you are. You totally are, because now that AI is helping us with these reports or inputting documents into our system, I'm going to use you to work on these other things that I need for you to actually put a little thought process, because you are a person and you have that critical thinking aspect. So let's go to the next slide. I just feel with the experience that I have, I was one of those persons that I was scared of the automation, just because one, you're not used to new stuff, right? You're comfortable, like Leonie said, sometimes you need to get out of that comfort zone. So I think don't be scared of automation in your work. To the contrary, just try to embrace it and roll with it. When I see and I turn back of how things used to be and all of the, like, that manpower, all that manual labor that we used to input into our docketing tasks, all of that has reduced. All of those repetitive tasks are being handled by AI. So all of the new stuff where I need people to, it's not just one task where they're going to have to put the information into their system. They need to think of, where am I going to put this? What do I need to do? That's where I'm utilizing these docketers that are in my department. I think artificial intelligence, in my case, in my experience, it has opened up new opportunities. And I've seen it at Black Hills and I've seen it at Schwegman. Don't have the mindset that AI is a substitution of your job. Think of it as a tool to help you with your tedious, repetitive tasks so you can focus on issues that need that critical thinking. You see right now in this slide, this woman, there's a stack of a whole bunch of documents, and then you see this woman in front of a computer, and where are all of those files? Well, all of those files, you are still dealing with it. You just don't need the physical document in front of you, because AI is helping us with that to be a little bit more efficient and to be a little bit more productive, and at the long run, keeping the clients happy too, right? And maybe lower costs as well, because there's more productivity in the people that are actually working in docketing. So it's very close. It's very true, that old saying where they say, when one door closes, another one opens. And this really applies to AI, because you think AI is going to terminate your job, yet other opportunities and more work pops up, because there is always work to be done. There is always room for improvement in everything. And docketing procedures are not the exception. So we need to be open-minded about change and sometimes get out of your comfort zone, like Leonie said, to be able to discover new ways. How can AI help us to be more productive and efficient? And it will help us to give better service to our clients. So with that said, I know I've already talked too much. I'm gonna turn it back to Russ.
Well, thanks, Zee. No, it's great having firsthand discussion about how AI and automation have affected operations at law firms. So thank you. Got a few questions I want to kind of touch on before we wrap this up. And one of the questions was really asking AI, machine learning. A lot of these terms get mixed up. And for the purposes of this discussion, we're kind of treating them all the same. But we appreciate that machine learning and rules-based AI, in AI in general, they all have different descriptions, and Manjeet, I'm sure, could give us a fantastic lecture on all of that. But for purposes of this, let's just say that it's using that processing power to automate parts of the job. And how it's done in the background right now is not necessary to explain, but thanks for the question. There was a question about, how do you pass the automation costs along to clients? And really, I think that it is not a zero-sum game. I mean, the cost of automating, the cost of the employees to manage the processes, of course, there's a cost there, but the efficiency, production, the increased quality and turnaround time also have a value. And so I think that question has to be answered individually from firm to firm and operation to operation. But I think in most of our audience, if you take a look, and I know Schwegman has done a lot of webinars to talk about how automation has significantly improved not only their operation, but their bottom line. We'll find that these tools are beneficial and don't have necessarily a net increase in cost. There was one question that came in. I want to give this to Leonie because wondering if you could give a quick answer. It may be hard quickly, but what areas have you found that were most challenging to automate in the process?
That would be convincing your coworkers that it will work. I'm laughing because it took a lot of growing pains, and Zee and Ellen and Adam can attest to this because it's easy to have a plan, but to actually execute it takes a lot of guts. And so, yeah, it's the people around you and ensuring that, it will work out.
Thanks, Leonie. I mean, from a technical standpoint, there's always challenges, and Adam could speak to this too, as you're analyzing, as he says, the desired output and the inputs and what can be done. What may not be easily achieved today may actually be relatively easy to achieve tomorrow. So it's a constant evolution, and as I said, the future is uncertain. And one of our audience members pointed out that as more tasks are being automated, it creates challenges to training. So there's always going to be the need for some manual docketing, for exceptions when errors happen that the AI may spot. And it's going to create some challenges for the organizations going forward to make sure that they still have that manual talent and knowledge available. So the automation is not going to be the cure of everything, but it is the future. It is happening now, and it will continue to happen. So I want to thank all of our panelists today, and those of you that joined in live and are watching this as a telecast. That we don't know where the future is, but we know that it's going to change. It's going to use these tools, and looking forward to what it will actually bring to our practices and operations. So thank you for joining us today. Thank you to our excellent panel. If we didn't get to any of your questions, we will try to get to them offline, but you always reach out to us, and we'd be happy to share some experiences and knowledge. Thank you.